Hello, and welcome to Monumental, where we sit down with entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries, and big thinkers making monumental change. Here's your host, Evan Holiday.
Welcome to Monumental. I'm Evan Holiday, your host, and today on the show with us, we have the man himself, Ola Dantis. Ola, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Evan.
Yes, very glad to have you on the show. A quick little background on Ola before we get started. He's the founder and CEO of Dwellynn.com, a multifamily investment syndication firm, and has successfully sourced deals of over $40 million by working closely with sellers and with other apartment syndicators across the country. Though Ola has only lived in the US for a few years, he has successfully completed rehab projects in excess of $1 million, and he continues to exceed investor returns, building upon his success on the real estate investing space. And he likes to post his progress and encourages a community of more than 45,000 strong on Instagram. He has a few deals in the works in Texas, which I'm excited to get into. And as well, he aims to give back through Dwellynn's One House Pledge, which is an initiative to donate a house to a family for Christmas starting in Baltimore. So with that, Ola, let's just dive right in, a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I typically have a long story that I like to tell. So I'm gonna do the same thing, just so because when you have guests, I have a podcast too. They just say, hey, this person has X amount of units and X amount of millions, and it just sounds really grandiose without kind of a foundation. So I like to kind of go back to the beginning, so folks that are listening to this can kind of make that connection.
Yeah.
So essentially, I was born in Nigeria. I grew up in the United Kingdom, in London. And then, my wife came to America to intern at Disney. And then, she's like, hey, you should come check it out, come to America. So I remember flying into Orlando, Florida. I'm a window seat guy on the plane, and I was looking down on suburbia America. And I was like, I could just vividly remember, this is so beautiful. Like, wow, this is just nice. And obviously got to Florida, really liked it. My wife was like, maybe we should move here. I was like, okay. I mean, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. It's really beautiful here in Florida. So anyway, we moved, I think 2 or 3 years later after that, my very first trip to America. And we landed in Baltimore, Maryland, far a distance, a little bit of a distance from Florida, but never mind. But we were in Baltimore, Maryland. Shortly thereafter, my wife got a job, then I got a job, so it was kind of like this, vicious circle, I'll call it, like go to work, come home, do it again, go to work, traffic, come home, do it again. And I was thinking, there's gotta be more to life. There's gotta be more to this, right? And then, my friend called me from the UK. Actually, I lived in the UK, like I said, and he said, hey, Ola, can you jump on the plane and meet me in Dubai? And I like to tell the story, not just because I want to tell the story, but, we always think of like success as kind of like, a golden box with a red ribbon and it's delivered Amazon Prime and it's just perfect for you with your name on it. But sometimes success could be a phone call. And that was for me, that was my phone call, right? And my friend was like, hey, come to Dubai. I really need you with my business in the UK. And, obviously I help with consulting. That was my master's degree in the UK. So I was like, okay, sure. I'll come. And obviously I prayed about it and I asked my wife like, hey, I want to go to Dubai. And she's like, dude, have you heard of Zoom, Skype, FaceTime? Why do you want to, fly? Obviously this was pre-COVID, right? Why do you want to fly all the way? That it was years ago. Anyway, got to Dubai. My friend and I were in a hotel room essentially for like 3 days, just masterminding on his business. And I was like, oh my God, he's doing so well, making all this money in the UK. So on my way back on the plane, I was like, I could actually do this real estate thing in America. Like, why not, right? But of course, I didn't know anything about real estate. So when I got back, I just asked my best friend, Google about real estate. And then I obviously got into Bigger Pockets. If you're listening to this and you've never heard about Bigger Pockets, you got to check that website out. And then I got into the podcast of Bigger Pockets. And then all the guests kept talking about this one book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was like, okay, I think I should buy this book because apparently everybody likes this book. And I read that book, and the best way to describe it was my brain got a uppercut from that book, because I was like, oh my goodness, this guy wrote this book in 1992 or whatever, but I felt like he stole my idea. Like, this is everything I've been trying to articulate or wrap my head around, like this whole idea of go to work, come home, do it again kind of thing that I was agitated with. I was like, oh my God, this is what this guy is talking about. So obviously, I think it was 3 months after that, we bought our first duplex in Baltimore, Maryland, Class A area, in Baltimore. At the time, before we bought this building, though, important to mention, my wife and I were living in a place called Columbia, Maryland. It's a luxury suburban area in Maryland. We had this beautiful apartment building. Obviously, I didn't know somebody was getting my cash flow. Different conversation for a different day. But then I didn't have to worry about parking our cars. I never had to worry about what property taxes were. I didn't care what day the trash was being taken. So now I moved from that comfort of, just living life, right? Living life, to now I have to make sure I take out the trash every Tuesday and Thursday, recycle Thursday. This is important stuff. And I have to worry about property taxes. Then I can never, because we're now in the city and I have to circle around the block. It was uncomfortable, right? It was uncomfortable, right? Buying this building, living in the city, having to worry about actually maintaining a home, right? Talk about adulting, right? But one thing happened, right? My wife and I were at home on a typical night after work, doing what lovers do, cooking, right? And then we just got talking like, hey, I was telling her like, hey, I've noticed that my account just keeps growing and growing. Like, I've got so much money in there. I mean, before this, money comes in, goes right back out. But now it's actually accumulating.
Yeah.
And my wife said, me too, right? So I was like, oh my goodness, that was kind of the epiphany for us. Like, wow, we just bought this unassuming duplex, right? We moved in the bottom. We had tenants upstairs paying most of the mortgage. So we had all this excess capital. And we're like, oh my goodness, what if we could do this 5, 10 times? We wouldn't have to go to work, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what, that was kind of like the inception of our company, Dwellynn.com. So, after then I got a mentor and started the process of building our multifamily business.
That's amazing, man. And I think that that rings true to a lot of our listeners and a lot of people out there, is like, it takes those little steps and those little learning and growing and getting uncomfortable and seeing others around you, be like, okay, wait a second, I could do what he's doing. Like, that's achievable. If he can do it, I can do it. And then you start educating yourself and you're like, hey, wait a second, there's a whole world out there that I didn't even know existed called real estate investing. And after a while, it actually just makes you money with little work. And
absolutely,
it's the power of passive income, it's the power of cash flow, and it's the power of real estate. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome story. So as far as taking that step from going from the duplex to multifamily investing, walk us through that.
Yeah, definitely. I had a detour though. So, like I mentioned, I had the epiphany. I was like, oh my goodness, let me go buy more, right? Because I already knew the process worked. Now I'm skipping a bunch, obviously. We bought this property, did a rehab on the property. We got a bunch of equity from it in 18 months. We did pretty well with it, right? So I was like, oh, I can rehab a house, right? Because I just did that on this duplex, right? And I met a partner that said, hey, we could go buy some houses down the road, flip them, and make like 50 to 100 grand. I was like, oh, that sounds great. Even though I'd already said to myself, let me just continue in multifamily. I was basically, going after something shiny, this, as you've heard before, the shiny object syndrome. And I went into flipping. And that, in retrospect, I feel like hurt my multifamily syndication trajectory, because I lost like a year flipping these houses, realizing that I just gave myself a second job, right? Which was not what I was going after. So my path, even though at the time I had a mentor, I had to tell my mentor like, hey, I want to take like a kind of a sabbatical, like, I want to go flip a house. And obviously my mentor knew that you're going to come back home, which I did, obviously. So I made those mistakes. We still have some of those assets, obviously, in Baltimore. And I realized like, hey, I just really want to go back to multifamily syndication. So for me, being, part of a mentorship group was absolutely critical to my success, right? Not only do I get all this knowledge, right, from a single source, right? Obviously, you can scout the internet and get different, disparate information, but it was just in one place. But more importantly, I could coalesce with other partners within the group. So, I got my partners, found people that, I really liked. And then we basically started our journey into buying, one of our first buildings, actually. So 160 unit here in Houston. I was living in Baltimore at the time, which is why I moved to Houston. And I'm going to talk about that, what we're planning to do here in Houston, which is vertically integrate the firm. But essentially, we bought the first building, and that was kind of the beginning of the journey.
That's great, and I'm glad you brought up mentorship and like a mentorship group, because there's so many benefits besides just the mentor. It's the accountability, it's the trust and partnership that you can build with others. Same thing on my end. I mean, we're looking at deals with guys in the mastermind that we're in, because we know and trust them, and we're already sharing a lot about our business, so we know each other. We know where they're headed, and we know what their skills and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So we all trust each other a lot more.
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you get to the point of deciding on that mentorship group and then also making that investment? Because I know some of our listeners have gone through that of saying, I need a mentor, but they're not quite ready to make the commitment. What made you ready for that commitment?
To be honest with you, I have so many opinions about this, just like everybody does, right? And first and foremost, I just got to say this first: mentors are not magicians. So people think if I get a mentor, then next week I'm going to get an apartment building. Apartment syndication, multifamily syndication is one of the most complex, real estate investing strategy. Like if you were to go down the street and buy a home and flip it, or wholesaling or whatever, it's fairly straightforward compared to syndication, right? So I always say this, even if you're a Saudi prince with gazillion dollars, you still need people to help you in a syndication. You need attorneys, you need just a disparate group of people, right, to help you bring that deal from when you source the deal to when you actually close it. And then after you close it, to asset managing the thing. I mean, we do this every day, so trust me, I know. So you need a lot of people. So that's that. And for me, I knew that I needed someone else that I've done this before, but more importantly, somebody that I share the same values with, right? Because I'm a millennial, right? We live in this generation of, Instagram and, showing off everything and how amazing we are. So I wanted a mentor that had the same values as me, that I could relate to and wasn't pompous, and that was important to me, right? And that was kind of different from my values. So, that's why I chose my mentor, and he's a great guy. He's one of the best people in our business. And, that's why I went with him. And actually there was a story to it. So I was listening to a podcast, and my mentor, was a guest. And at the end, this was years ago, by the way, at the end of the podcast, he was like, hey, I'm going to give out my number because nobody's going to call me. Well, obviously, I'm nobody. So I called him. I said, like, hey,
nobody.
That's me. I was like, whatever you're charging, I cannot afford it, but I need you to be my mentor. And obviously, I was able to negotiate one of my strong skill set, and I got into the program. Now, for anybody out there thinking they want to do multifamily syndication, either from a really, really active side, or they're thinking of doing that in the nearest future, the quickest way to scale is to coalesce, right? So just find somebody that is doing it, maybe in your market. If you're like, some people are very touchy-feely, face-to-face, find somebody in your market. It could be like an OG in your market that's been doing this for 30 years, or maybe somebody younger, and just like interview them, get with them, right? The other thing is people say, like, the mentorship are too expensive. Now it goes back to Robert Kiyosaki's book. Don't say anything is expensive. Say I cannot afford this, but how can I afford it? Right? So Lamborghinis continues to they make their cars. If it was so expensive, they'll be out of a business. So
Yeah.
clearly they're not expensive. It's just expensive for particular groups of people. So
Yeah.
so if you say a mentorship program is expensive, to whom is the question? And the better question is, how can I afford it? Meaning, it doesn't mean how can I afford this, whatever people are charging these days. Is can I break it down into smaller chunks with this person, or can I combine it with helping this person in some shape or form? So I tell people, make that investment because we're paying for universities thousands and thousands, and some
Yeah.
of us are not even doing what we go to university for. We're doing
Exactly.
something completely different. So hey, why not?
So you joined the mentorship program. In quick side note, I did want to touch on. You mentioned like you went through the rehab, the fix and flip process, and that probably slowed you down a year getting into apartments and syndication, which ultimately can you can scale a lot more quickly in that. And I think that's a great point to bring up because I think we've all been distracted by the shiny object syndrome, and I've had it happen to me where I'm like, hey, my buddies over there are fixing and flipping a lot of houses and making a lot of quick cash because you can turn those things in 3 months or less if you're good at it. And I just see that I'm like, man, that looks enticing. But then you have to step back and be like, well, is this aligned with my why? Is this aligned with where I'm heading? Is this aligned with what I really want to be spending my time doing? And long term, is this going to help me get to where I want to be, both financially, as far as impact wise as well, and just where you want to be in life. Looking at 5, 10 years from now, not the short term. I think having that long term approach is so valuable.
Yeah, and I got to touch on that, Evan, because for me personally, and I think a lot of people don't talk about it or think about this too much, is understanding your temperament, right? For
Yeah.
me, being a flipper was just not aligned with my temperament, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know that until I was in, kind of knee deep, right? I wanted things to be perfect. I was hoping contractors, con is the first 3 letters of contractors, pay attention to those, that they were going to be honest, they were going to be on time, they were going to do what they said they were going to do. I had integrity issues with them, and they're looking at me like, what's the big deal? I said I was going to be at 10, I came at 2. What's the big deal? But my temperament didn't align with that, so like
Yeah.
little things like that you get to know yourself as well, and people don't think about that, before they jump into things like, flipping. It just looks great on HGTV, but in real life, it's a very interesting play.
Yeah. And I think another thing is there's always buildup in a learning curve in all of this. And so if you're going to spend time learning the short game process of like a fix and flip, then that's only going to, like you said, it's going to delay the time that you start your learning curve on apartment syndication or whatever the bigger end goal that you want to get to. It's just ultimately delays you.
Yeah, there's always a price to pay, and
Yeah.
it's always going to be the full price. There are no discounts in life.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, one of my favorite words, or I guess 2 words, is opportunity cost. Because
Exactly.
I think a lot of people lose track of that and forget that every time they're putting their time towards something, they're taking away time from other things.
Inevitably. Yep.
So walk us through, you were doing the fix and flips and then you decided to really hunker down and focus on apartment syndication. And you said the first deal, what did you say, was 160 unit?
On 60. Yep.
How'd you go from 0 to 160?
Well, thankfully it wasn't 0, so I'd already done some properties already. But to answer your question more specifically, how do you go from basically small multis to larger? You partner, right?
Yeah.
So I was part of this group, and they were looking at this deal. They sent me this deal. I looked at the Houston market, really liked Texas, but didn't like DFW because it was getting super hot at the time. So this deal came across my desk, but my partners, I was like, oh, this is something we can definitely coalesce together. So we did. We really liked the deal. It had a really good value add component to it. It was in Houston. not in the flood zone. And I really like Houston a lot. I mean, I moved here anyway, so we just kind of, combined forces and took down the deal sometime just towards the, I think, last quarter of 19. And then we're still kind of working through the progress of the deal. Been there a few times now that I'm local. So yeah, it's going pretty well. Obviously, COVID-19, has been interesting for everyone. But the property has been performing, with everything going on pretty well, actually.
That's great. And can you kind of walk us through that deal, how it was put together, and then kind of deal size and amount of capital raised and all those things?
Yeah, so that was we got that at 11.5. We try not to disclose because of Houston, but it's okay. 11.5. We raised pretty much the capital. Let's just call it like 30 to 35% of the equity, including some of the capex as well. Typically, our deals are, for the most part, we do 80-20. I'm going really fast, so let me just kind of go back. Basically, 80% goes to the LPs, so limited partners or passive investors. These are folks that just, basically contribute equity to the deal. And then 20% goes to what we call the GP side, the general partners, essentially those that are managing the deal. And then we normally do something called a preferred return. So that's 8%, essentially. Our limited partners, who are the investors that have contributed equity, would get the 8% first, disbursed to them before we get paid. So I think that approach for us works because it just shows the element of interest between us and our LPs, and it just basically, proves that we're not just in it for, just the money. So that's kind of our structure. So we do an 8% pref and then an 80-20 or 75, depending on the deal, 75-25.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up a lot of these. When you're getting into syndication, it makes so much more sense to be able to partner, because at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of aspects and facets to these deals that you can't know on your first deal. You don't know what you don't know. And so having people on your team that have gone through this process before, that know certain questions to ask, know what things to look for when you're hiring your management company, your attorneys, your different outside partners, that's really important to the process. And that's why a team is valuable when getting started.
Absolutely.
So walk us through, so you're in Baltimore, you started out in Baltimore when you found this deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you moved to Houston. Was it for this deal or was it for a larger reason?
Yeah, for a larger reason. So, with property management, it's been always an interesting debate amongst our group, our buying group, is do you want to go third party? Do you want to go, in-house, right? And we've been having this conversation for quite some time, and we're kind of getting towards the point where we really want to hunker down and bring everything in-house, but not too fast though, right? Because there's a lot of conversation that we have in that. It looks like we're doing a ton of the work for the property management companies anyway, because we're talking to the regionals so much, where we're giving ideas on how to make sure the leasing specialists are doing what they're supposed to do. We put in our marketing strategies. We're doing all these things. We're thinking, well, maybe we should just bring some of this in-house, right? I mean, I'm local now, so we can, get, different bodies that we can affiliate with, get different designations and certificates that we need to be certified apartment managers. So that's one of the things we're looking at right now. So for us, the purpose of moving here was to basically continue the vision of Dwellynn as being a vertically integrated real estate firm. So what does that mean? Essentially is we'll basically have different facets to the business. So acquisition, property management, construction management, and then obviously development, which is in 5-10 years, kind of that's the timeline we're looking at. So that's why we moved in, to really, really, get our Dwellynn flag and like stick it deep in the ground here in Houston, Texas. Nice. And we're not going anywhere. Yeah, I told my wife we're not moving. We've got a great church. We like it. Yeah, so we're doing that.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, and I think that you bring up a couple of things I want to touch on. Is like, first off, moving to your market can be powerful, because I know a lot of people live in expensive cities, expensive markets to get started in apartment investing or just real estate investing in general. And it's hard to invest in your back door. It doesn't really sometimes make sense. And so it makes a lot of sense if you're really committed to a market, if you believe in the growth of a market and you want to get that economies of scale in that market, then find a way that you can move to the market and be close to the action, learn the deals intimately, be able to check on your partners, check on your property manager, check on your construction. Being able to have that face-to-face touch means the world as far as quicker progress. My fiance and I actually moved to Nashville about 2 years ago for that same reason. We're like,
Oh, wow.
I was doing developments in Nashville, but living in Louisville. And I was like, man, this is a lot of work, like traveling all the time. I was always on the road, leaving my fiance in Louisville. And so after a point, I was like, wait a second, like if we just live in Nashville, then I can go to a coffee meeting whenever. I can meet investors. I can meet general contractors. I can meet whoever, and be there in 15 minutes instead of 3 hours.
Absolutely.
So,
I just drove by a property yesterday, and then I was texting and calling the broker, and
yeah,
because I mean I wish we touch on this. I like to tell people as well, like being an investor, there's an element of what I call game. Like it's when I say game, not in a nefarious way, but it's understanding, how you're playing within this game. Like we didn't set up
yeah,
the rules. People have been doing multifamily in investing before we're born. Okay,
yeah,
that's how the game works. So like in the beginning, I was like, banging my head on the proverbial wall, trying to
yeah,
find deals. Like I need to find deals by myself, and I did find a ton of it. But I
yeah,
figured, why don't I just be best friends with all the brokers? Like
yeah,
know their family, know them well, play golf with them. That's part of the competitive edge that I have over some guy out in New York City or in
yeah,
California, right? So that's one of the reasons that I'm here. I know the brokers, they know me. We shake hands. Well, not anymore, but before COVID-19,
we bumped
so
elbows.
yeah, so yeah, that's why as well.
Yeah, yeah. Let's dive into that a little bit more, because I think that's a great point to point out. Like, for example, we've been in Nashville for 2 years. We've gotten to a point, same as what you're saying, is with brokers specifically. Last weekend we went boating with a good broker friend of mine. He's become a close friend, and him and his girlfriend are great friends with me and my fiance. And so now we hang out all the time, and so we can have that close friendship relationship and do deals together. And so that makes it more likely that we're going to work together and we're going to find a way to do deals together. And it's just fun being able to talk real estate with people that you like hanging out with too. It's kind of an
There
added
you
bonus.
go. Yeah.
So I think that's something good to bring up. And same thing with going to networking events, being involved in the community, because you never know where relationships are going to, come up out of nowhere. It's amazing the ways that you'll find leads, and the more touches you can have, especially being in the community and being a community member, the more touches you can have, the more likely it is your name's going to come up when there's somebody willing to sell, or somebody's looking for a development partner, somebody's looking for somewhere to put their capital, their hard-earned capital. So I think that's really, really important.
Yep.
I love it. So, and I also want to dive into, you have this vision for Dwellynn. I see that time and again where I talk to people, or we, work with people on the coaching side, and you ask them, okay, what is your goal? Where do you want to go? What do you see as the future of your family, your business, your life, your impact? And sometimes they really haven't given that much thought to it, but yet it is our future. But you have given some thought to that, and you've said, okay, I want to have a vertically integrated company. We're moving to Houston. We're taking action, and we're making this happen because I see this future for Ola and for Dwellynn, of this vertically integrated company.
Yeah, and I think a couple of kind of things just to throw out there, like building a company that would outlast you, and then building a company that is sellable, right? It's kind of two things that come to mind. I don't see Dwellynn as, Ola Dantis Inc. I see it as a company when I'm long gone, our just cause will be carried on. And it doesn't have to be by my girls, my two daughters. It could be somebody else. It could be, somebody that just joins the company and help with the building process. That's what we're trying to build. And that vision of being, a firm that really, really has a close touch and providing, and with the communities and providing affordable homes is really close and dear to our heart. So really that's the overarching vision that I want to build. And when you look at that, that future state of that company, the best way to get there is to be vertically integrated, right? So if you want to be a company that, that's going to be here for, decades, right? I didn't want to say centuries, but decades, you want to be kind of within those four arms that I mentioned of real estate, a real estate servicing company, construction, acquisition, management, and just the full, facet of real estate. So that's kind of what we're doing, and that's why we're starting here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's same with our vision with Holiday Ventures is you can just have you know how you want to run your business, you know the vision, you know the quality, the level of service that you want to provide. And when you're handing that over to a partner, that may not always happen the way you see it, or it may get lost in translation. And I think it's so powerful to have that level of touch on every facet of the business. Not to mention the benefits of, there could be benefits of efficiency, of scale, and mere ability to basically make an income. Vertically integrated companies can make multiple streams of income from one project. So that's very powerful too.
Absolutely.
And then let's dive into what you mentioned about affordable housing and kind of that being part of your mission.
Yeah, I mean, so as we know, rent not so much now with obviously the subsequent blowback of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we know rates for rent are rising. Folks, kind of the affordability index, as we call it, it's just getting harder for folks to get affordable homes. So we're trying to be that company. And how can we create beautiful spaces, but that doesn't cost so much that the average man or woman on, out there in America can have, a beautiful space that they call their home at a really good price. So for us, that's kind of the goal. It's a challenging one because how do you create a beautiful looking apartment building from the outside and a beautiful home inside at a good price, at a reasonable price, right? So that's
Yeah.
one of the things. And we work with different companies. We work with a company out of, I think they're based out of Dallas or Austin, I can't remember, where they basically assemble an apartment building off-site and they bring it and put it together on-site. So that way of building saves cost, helps with, efficiencies. And, so that's one thing that we're looking at. Could this help, to provide, this is when we get to development 5-10 years down from now. Could this help with the affordability issue? We're looking at other asset classes like mobile home parks. Could this be something we could put into our portfolio to help further our just cause? So that's kind of what we're doing, and this takes a lot of time. We understand that, but we're ready, obviously, and willing to take that risk of being that company. We're not going for like full blown luxury. I mean, not right now anyway. Luxury apartments.
Yeah.
That's not the goal right now.
Why do you think affordable housing and providing that beautiful space at an affordable price point that families can afford, why is that important to you?
Yeah, because we know for a fact that folks want to live a good life, right?
Yeah.
People want to be in a place where they feel safe, right, security wise, and they feel like it's home, right? Nobody wants to live in a space that is not not appealing, right? So as we know from obviously our units now, we try to give a lot of our residents that feel of home and a place they want to come back to, a place that it makes them, that they can build memories in. So for us, we want to make sure that we don't, as the inequality gap widens in America, we're doing our best to make sure that folks, everyday folks, can still get a good place and an affordable place that they can call home.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think that's so powerful and so needed right now. We're 10 years plus out of the Great Recession of 08, 09, and that had this like crippling effect for middle to lower income families. And now we're kind of seeing that effect again. Who knows what the long term effect will be, but I can imagine that it's not going to be very positive as far as an affordability standpoint for middle to lower income families, with the pandemic, with COVID, and with a lot of people losing their jobs, especially skewed on that affordable side of the scale. So I think that's valuable work, and that's needed more than ever.
Right, right, and we hope to at least make a dent in that.
Yeah, exactly. And then as far as I wanted to touch on like Nigeria, the UK, Baltimore, Houston, but all starting in Nigeria. Like how? Let's dive into what is it like from your perspective as an immigrant to be able to come over here and make this happen, and also your perspective as an immigrant.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. That's such a loaded question. And obviously, we're recording this June 10, 2020, with everything going on with the unrest in America.
Yeah,
And, I tell my friends, America is still the best country on the planet. And
yeah,
obviously, now more than ever, there's a strong reaction. And don't get me wrong, people are calling me from the UK. My sister lives in the UK. I've got friends calling me almost in
yeah,
tears, venting, like, what is going on in America? And I tell them the same thing. And it's very hard to understand. But what am I saying for anyone listening before you judge me? I see America as a highway, right? It's a super highway where you can run, you can crawl, you can jump, you can pretty much, you can find gold, but you can find snakes. it's
yeah,
it's like an highway that can give us a black president, right, as well as any kind of president, as we can see. So that's how I see America, and I think there's a bit of a genius to that. Now, this is a brain of somebody that was born in Africa. So Africa doesn't work. Sorry, Nigeria, where I was born in Africa, isn't like the United States, where you could
yeah,
literally be someone like me and still be able to push forward a little bit, right? Now, I don't want to get overly, social and political on your show. I was lucky in that I came into America and plugged into the system. I was not born into the system, right? So those are two different things. I kind of came with my fancy degrees and I could
yeah,
plug in, right? But as a guy that looks like me, if I was born in America, I'm not quite sure. I might still be able to wiggle my way up, but of course, as you know, it's a little bit, it could be a little bit trickier. So, to go back to your question, being born in Africa, in Nigeria, living in the UK, and now in the US, that's how I came up to that conclusion. It's still overall, we haven't had a black prime minister in the
yeah,
United Kingdom. We probably wouldn't have one for a little while,
yeah,
right? But we had Barack Obama, right? So, I mean, people need to think about that. And I just feel like, America's economic system mixed with this political system, the two-party system works. Now is messy, but I think it works, right? I watch a lot about China. There's a good, and for any nerds out there, go check out History 101 on Netflix.
oh
And the
yeah, we were
episode,
watching
yeah,
that.
The Rise of China. Yeah. So, is a communist system, but they figured out a way to include, it's pretty much capitalism. That's the economic
Yeah,
system, essentially.
yeah,
So they're like, call us what you want. We're basically capitalists, essentially. So, but they still have some issues too, right? So that's why I make that comment, and that's my perspective. I don't know if does that answer your question somewhat?
yeah. No, I think that's great, because I think you have such a unique perspective because you've seen the world through many lenses, right? And I think sometimes that's what is forgotten for those. I think broadly across the world, anybody that doesn't open themselves up to other perspectives and doesn't explore the world and doesn't explore other people's opinions, even if they may differ with their own, they're going to miss out on a lot of personal growth and a lot of opportunity to see the world in a new light and a more open light. So I appreciate you sharing that.
No, thank you.
Um, and I think what you're saying exactly with what is going on with Black Lives Matter and everything else, I think this is also a time for, like you mentioned, like this is a time to talk about affordable housing and how that plays into that as well. Because typically families in the middle to lower income that are served by affordable housing typically are more more people of color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate you diving into that and going into affordable housing, and that means a lot to me. I'm biased because I do affordable housing, and that's my
Oh,
why,
nice.
and that's my yeah, that's what I get excited about. So I'm biased, but I
Yeah,
think that's really
good.
important. Um, well, let's dive into one last question. As far as you mentioned, mobile home parks, modular, um, what what for you like gets you excited about that and development? You said 5, 10 years down the road.
Yes. So I think, for us, everything kind of starts with the vision, right? So we have looked at mobile home parks for quite some time. But we don't feel like as a company we're there to start to introduce that to our investors. So we're really trying to tackle, multifamily, specifically apartment communities first. And when we feel like we have kind of critical mass there, then we can start to, kind of diversify into those other asset types within multifamily, right? Mobile home parks. So we don't want to go too far out. I'm licking my wounds into flipping. So we don't want to too far out. We kind of want to stay there. Now, from a development perspective, that also, not only helps us with speed of completion, which also helps with affordability, ironically, well, not so ironic, but if you can finish your projects quicker,
Right.
you don't have to spend so much money, and hopefully that would help with, affordability and stuff like that. So that's kind of like the connection, and we're still very much in the exploratory phase. We think we're onto something, but at the same time we're being cautious on making sure that we don't end up, exacerbating the issue by building fancy apartments that most people can't afford. Essentially, yeah. Our target
Yeah.
audience, anyways.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is there's that balance between creating affordability, creating quality affordability, and creating something that is really nice and beautiful, and something that could be a statement piece. Um, because you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to pay for it somehow. So, um,
Exactly.
well, let's dive into our monumental questions. What does success mean to you?
Oh man, that's such a good question. What does success mean to me? I think success just means that, after all said and done, everyone literally that I've met and touched, either by my voice or physically, well, maybe not right now too again, but, gets a sense of warmth and a sense of, wow, whatever others said there made me think, or whatever that interaction was different. That's kind of my life goal, right? To
Yeah,
kind of make sure that you're being a good person overall as much as you can, as you're touching, what I'll consider, souls, right? As you're meeting people in your everyday life, either people that you work with, your family, your community. I just want to be a great dad to my two beautiful girls, and then my wife to be a great, husband. I really think there's nothing much better than that in life. So for me, that's what success really looks like. I mean, money is great. Obviously, you need that, but it's much more about you being a better person, and living a better impact on the world,
yeah,
especially our generation. Like I don't want to be that guy, just look at me, I'm so better than you. You know, like we see a lot of that on social media. It's I think it contributes to some of the issues we're now seeing in society.
Yeah.
Different podcast, totally different podcast, Evan, for that.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I love that. What about daily habits or morning rituals?
Oh yeah, got a ton of those. So usually I'll be quick. Usually I wake up, I drink my oolong tea. I try to meditate. I'm not doing that 100% right now, but I try to meditate and I try to read a book, even if it's like, you know, a few pages. I'll try to read a book in the morning, and then I go for my 3 mile walk. So this is what I'm reading right now, obviously. And a
Nice.
practical apartment management book. So I'll do that, and then I'll go for a walk, and then start my day. I used to do the all writing my goals down 29 times. I haven't done that in a while.
I love it. What about favorite book or book you're currently reading? So you just showed us the management
I
book.
think, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's the book I'm reading now. But a book I just finished actually is called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. I don't know if you know that name. Is the guy that wrote Why? Start with Why, and
Yeah.
It does It Last. Yeah, same guy with the TED Talk. So yeah, and that book is basically he's just saying nobody wins out of life. Like, you know, when we die, we're not gonna go, yeah, you know, you're the winner. That like there isn't a winner, guys. Like, and I think that is so needed in our generation. Like, you know, just be a good person. Like, it's not about who has the most money, the biggest private jet. At the end of the day.
Yeah, that's important to remember.
Yep.
Well, Ola, first off, I want to thank you. I felt like we covered some amazing topics here, you know, from vertical integration to the why behind affordability and moving to markets, moving to Houston, taking that leap with a mentor and apartment syndication. So I want to thank you for coming on, first off, and then also, where can our Monumental listeners reach out to you, follow you, or connect with you?
Yeah, I think Instagram, Ola Dantis, you can't miss it. The other place is, well, I'm pretty much ubiquitous online. So if you just Google my name or any platform you're at, if you're on LinkedIn, I'm on there. If you're on Facebook, I'm on there. But I think our website is Invest with Ola. So investwithola.com, and that redirects you to our Dwellynn site.
I love it. Guys, take Ola up on that. He is providing some tremendous value. Go check him out on Instagram. That's, I think, where we first connected and enjoyed the best ever conference. And then, guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it on social media. Let us know you're listening. Let us know what part you enjoyed the most. Share it with a friend. And one last thing, please help us grow our Monumental community and audience by sharing as well as posting and subscribing, rating, and reviewing today's episode. Guys, with that, have a monumental day.